Greetings to all. I feel it necessary to begin by acknowledging that my wife and I are quite open. Some may even say excessively so about our past experiences and former partners. You see, she is my second wife. My first marriage unfortunately ended due to infidelity on her part. We do share a son together, however. My current wife also has a daughter from a previous union. Despite the unorthodox dynamics of our blended family, we have managed to make everything work harmoniously for 5 years now. As I previously mentioned, openness is something we value greatly in our relationship. This tendency has led us to divulge details about our past romantic involvements. My wife's ex-husband was a notorious serial cheater known for his wayward lifestyle as a musician. His frequent gigs provided ample opportunities for him to engage in extramarital affairs with multiple women. One day, my wife stumbled upon his emails and was devastated to discover that he had been involved with not one, but 5 other women, one of whom was carrying his child. Fearing their unborn child would grow up in a broken household, she desperately tried to salvage their relationship and turned to an old internet acquaintance for guidance. For anonymity purposes, let's refer to this individual as Chris. They had been writing partners for 7 years prior, but never met in person until this pivotal moment in their lives. Interestingly enough, they had actually been working on a novel together before losing contact. She confided in me that when she reached out for support, he was incredibly kind and understanding. He offered countless ways to help her move past the infidelity and gave advice on what to discuss with an attorney. He was a true friend in every sense of the word. Somewhere along the way, they both decided to revisit their book project. Despite casually flirting with each other, they lived on opposite sides of the country, which made acting on their attraction impossible. As time went on, she began to realize that her marriage was beyond repair and stopped trying to fix things. Her feelings for Chris grew stronger, and by the end of the year, he flew out to finally meet her in person. She filed for divorce after their affair turned physical, and Chris eventually moved to be with her. But things became complicated when her 5-year-old daughter didn't take well to Chris. It wasn't that he did anything wrong, she just couldn't adjust to having someone new replace her father. My wife explained this to him and also mentioned his brash personality as another factor. She had intended for them to take a short break, but Chris was deeply hurt and decided to end things completely. After several months passed, they reconnected with the goal of finishing their book together. During this time, they resumed their physical intimacy, but it was purely physical. As they made progress on the book, she and I started dating, and they stopped sleeping together. She felt uneasy about keeping an ex in her life once we entered a committed relationship, and so she gradually slowed down her responses to his emails, all of which were related to the book, and ceased actively working on it. But that all changed a month ago. After 4 or 5 years of zero communication, he reached out to her out of the blue. He had contracted COVID and nearly lost his life. Chris contacted her because, during their time apart, he had rewritten the book without her involvement, managed to get it published, and released a sequel, and was now dangerously close to not being able to finish it if he didn't survive. In light of this, he wanted to make it clear that should something happen to him, he wanted her to have the rights to the project as she knew how it would end and helped create the story. It seemed like a fair request, but then the conversation took an unexpected turn. He had extended an invitation to her, asking if she would like to join him in adapting a comic book. She eagerly showed me the artwork he had already completed and enthusiastically explained the details of each character, their backstories, and even pointed out where she believed his designs were lacking. She had also read the first book and was quick to point out any changes made to names or characters in their version, as well as plot differences. It was obvious that this project meant a lot to her, and she seemed to be thoroughly enjoying herself. I was aware that they wrote together, but I didn't realize they had created an entire universe. It was clear that this was something very important to her. She seemed tempted by his offer to collaborate, but it made me anxious. In the past, every time they worked on something together, it inevitably led to sex. And considering there was some sexual content in their writing, I couldn't help but worry about history repeating itself. Although I trust my partner, and am not typically the jealous type, I don't want to see her get hurt again or for our relationship to suffer because of it. I'll admit I couldn't resist the temptation to snoop through their conversation. While he seemed solely focused on discussing the project with her, she was prying for information about his personal life. Though not necessarily in a flirtatious manner, she did ask if he was currently seeing anyone, and when he replied that relationships tend to get in the way of his busy schedule, she told him he needed to put himself back out there. She even went as far as saying that celibacy wasn't a good look on him. My partner and I are open about our past sexual experiences, so I knew from her that her ex-husband was terrible in bed. And once, while intoxicated, she even mentioned how great Chris was in bed, but warned not to let his skills convince anyone of the potential for a great relationship. It's clear that her words were still on his mind, and it made me uneasy. How do I even begin to navigate this situation? I am aware that her ex-husband caused emotional turmoil in her life, leading to her infidelity, but it was still with this man. I've had the chance to meet him, and on the surface, he seems like a respectable guy, but their shared history tells me there is potential for something to happen between them. It's a delicate balance. I want to express my concerns to my wife, but I also don't want to come across as controlling or domineering. I know how much her creative outlet means to her, the way she lights up when discussing this book that I knew very little about. It feels like something that holds great significance to her, something that she has suppressed for far too long. I want her to have that outlet, but without risking the possibility of their interactions turning into something more intimate, as it has happened 3 times before. Update number 1. The winds of change swept through our relationship when my wife's ex-boyfriend came back into her life, asking to collaborate on a writing project they had started together years ago. She had abandoned it, but he had achieved financial success with it now. I felt like I didn't even know the person I had spent the last 6 years of my life with. The level of deception and manipulation was beyond my comprehension. But I tried to be understanding and open-minded when she told me about their collaboration. I encouraged her to explore her passion for writing and even suggested that she could turn it into a profession since she was talented and enjoyed it. She agreed at first, assuring me that she didn't want anything to do with her ex, Chris, and was wary of his intentions. But as time passed, I couldn't shake off this nagging feeling that something wasn't right. So yesterday morning, while she was in the shower, I couldn't resist the urge to check her phone. And there it was. All evidence of their communication had been deleted just 3 days prior. My heart sank as countless red flags waved frantically in my mind. I checked my Facebook messages and saw that she was talking about a work trip to Vegas. Apparently, the 2-day event was cancelled due to COVID, but she's still planning on going. I noticed her discussing a hotel in a nearby town and sending each other vacation photos of Vegas to show off if I asked. They were also making plans for restaurants and admiring the full moon that would be present during his visit. As if that wasn't enough, it turns out he actually moved back to town recently, despite claiming to be on the East Coast. He even showed her on Google Maps where he was living, and it took all my willpower not to drive my truck straight into his living room. And remember when she said she had to pick up her brother from the airport last month? Turns out it was him. The messages don't go back very far, but they reference things they supposedly talked about during the years they haven't been in contact. One line that stands out is from him saying, "Yeah, we're just friends. I haven't seen you in 8 years, and I'm inside you 20 minutes after landing. Best friends, maybe." My heart races with anger and madness as I read these words. Shock and betrayal consume him as he discovers that his wife has been having an affair with another man for months now. The memories of her recent trip to her mother's house, where she stayed the night, flood his mind with a mix of anger and sadness. He hasn't confronted her yet, but every time he sees her smile now, it's like a knife through his heart. For the sake of their children and the upcoming holiday season, he tries to hold back from saying anything until after Christmas. But deep down, he knows that it's only a matter of time before he reaches his breaking point and confronts her about the infidelity. His attempts to swallow this bitter truth with a smile are becoming increasingly difficult. He feels like he's losing his grip on reality, contemplating extreme actions out of desperation and hurt. Frantically gathering evidence, photos, screenshots, conversations, he plans to consult with a lawyer tomorrow. With determination in his eyes, he meets with his brother's divorce attorney to discuss his options and make preparations. His mind is racing, trying to keep track of all the details as he documents everything: text messages, her whereabouts, her lies. He marks the date on the calendar when he will finally confront her after she goes to a hotel with her lover on the 2nd of next month. Despite the pain and anger consuming him, he still considers the well-being of his children and doesn't want to ruin Christmas forever for them. As the day wears on, he finds himself succumbing to waves of suicidal thoughts. Update number 2. Gratitude swells in my heart as I write this, thinking back on the kind advice and support offered by all those who responded to my post yesterday. It guided my thoughts away from darker places and gave my restless hands something to do. My brother has also been a constant source of strength during this difficult time, and I have continued to monitor their communications. My heart races as I try to stay one step ahead, constantly on guard for any signs of betrayal. But she noticed something was off about me today, and I had to quickly cover it up by telling her that I was just feeling down on the anniversary of my aunt's passing. Thankfully, it seemed to be enough of an excuse for her not to suspect anything. Today, I spent 3 hours parked outside of a McDonald's using their Wi-Fi to access her emails. To my dismay, I discovered that they were communicating through Yahoo Messenger, a platform that is easy to hide and delete evidence from. As I scroll through their conversations, my stomach twists into knots. She has sent him numerous pictures with her scantily clad body on display, all of which I am saving for future use. In one photo, she poses with the flowers I had given her for her birthday, a cruel reminder of how easily she can deceive me. And as if the images weren't enough, their sexts began as early as March. My eyes scan over select quotes from her messages. "I can't keep talking about the book all the time. I mentioned you twice when we last got together. If I suddenly start bringing you up more often now, he'll know something is wrong. You need to shave because that stubble is like knives. Almost had to put chapstick on my chin and under my nose." And from him, "You're getting it right before you leave here. I want him to kiss you after you've spent the afternoon swallowing me." The rage inside me is almost overwhelming. The urge to physically harm this man who has willfully caused me pain and betrayal is strong, but I know I must control it. Instead, I fantasize about wearing his teeth as a necklace, a physical representation of the destruction he has brought upon my life. Update number 3. Today, I have some work to do, so I may not be able to respond to anything for quite some time. I never want to experience something like this again. It was without a doubt the most grueling thing I've ever had to endure, and now I find myself twitching uncontrollably at times. She left today, either for work or to see Chris. I'm not entirely sure where she went. I attempted to track her location, but either she turned off her GPS or my phone was malfunctioning. I didn't have the means to officially serve her until later this week, but I needed to confront her before she realized what was happening. My garage door suddenly opened and I quickly turned on the camera. She walked in, completely oblivious, until I told her she should sit down because we needed to talk. Her face showed pure shock as she sat down and asked me what was wrong. My response, "Why don't you tell me?" She pretended not to understand, but it was clear by her expression that she knew she had been caught. She asked me again what was wrong. Taking a different approach, I decided not to accuse her directly and instead told her that I was uncomfortable with her working with Chris and that it was something I couldn't overlook. Surprisingly, she immediately agreed and nervously asked me why I changed my mind so quickly and why I was acting differently toward her. I can only shake my head, feeling a mixture of confusion and frustration. I wanted to be understanding about it, I explain, but I got weird vibes from him, and honestly, I'd prefer if we didn't talk about him. But she insists that their relationship is completely over, that she was just happy to see the book finally get made. I can feel my blood start to boil as I remind her that he essentially stole from her and she's being too forgiving. "You should sue him," I tell her firmly, and surprisingly, she agrees with me. At this point, I'm sure she's thinking she's gotten out of this whole mess and is planning to break things off with Chris as soon as possible. But then, I drop the bombshell. This whole situation has really stressed me out. I think I'm going to take next week off of work. She looks at me with surprise and concern, but before she can say anything, I continue. I talked with my son's mother, and she agreed to keep him for the weekend so that I could go to Vegas with you. A sly smile crosses my face as I recall our conversation earlier in the day, where we discussed the logistics of her taking care of our son while I enjoy a weekend away. But her reaction catches me off guard. Her expression turns from surprise to irritation as she tells me that our trip has been cancelled. My mind races, trying to come up with a quick solution before she can change her mind. Desperately, I start talking about how COVID has shut down so many things, and we may not even know what's open in Vegas. She cuts me off, her tone sharp as she explains that our plans were actually cancelled today. The conversation continues in this awkward and tense manner, both of us struggling to find a way out of this uncomfortable situation. Our words are carefully chosen and rehearsed, but our true feelings and intentions are bubbling just below the surface. We both know that this conversation could change everything between us. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest as we stood face to face, the tension palpable between us. The conversation had taken a sharp turn, and I wasn't sure how to navigate it. "I thought it got cancelled last month," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "No," he told us today, "because he wasn't sure until now," she replied, her tone defensive. "I know it got cancelled last month," I insisted. "What are you doing? Why would you tell me you wanted to go and then tell me it's cancelled?" Her tone was accusatory now. "I don't understand what you're trying to do." "It was cancelled last month," I repeated, feeling frustration rise within me. What were you planning on doing if I hadn't brought it up? "You're freaking me out," she said, her voice shaking slightly. "It was cancelled today." "What were you going to do in a town name where her hotel is?" I asked, feeling a bit of anger creeping into my voice. "What are you accusing me of?" she retorted, her expression growing defensive again. "How long have you and Chris been back together?" I asked, finally voicing the question that had been burning inside me. "We haven't done anything," she insisted. "Did he tell you we were?" "Don't lie to me," I said firmly, my patience wearing thin. "I read through all his messages, everything he sent you recently. It made me sick just reading them the first time. How could you do this to me?" "I love you. I'm sorry," she pleaded, tears welling up in her eyes. "He's been messaging me constantly and saying all these messed up things. I didn't know how to handle it. I wanted to tell you, but I was afraid of how you'd react. I thought maybe he'd stop on his own." "You didn't see him for 8 years, and within 20 minutes of his plane landing, you were sleeping with him," I stated, the reality of the situation hitting me hard. "What plane are you talking about?" she asked, confusion evident on her face. "What are you reading?" "He lives on his street name," I said, my voice cracking slightly. "Do you want to end this? Just admit what happened so we can move forward. Why did you tell me he lived on the East Coast?" "Did he say something to you?" she asked, a sense of desperation creeping into her voice. "He lies constantly. That's part of why we broke up. I told you that." I knew I shouldn't have responded to his messages, but he always knows how to manipulate me. All his messages seemed innocent at first, but then he started with the missing me stuff, like he always does. "I swear I was going to tell you everything." "He wanted you to come back home and kiss me after you had just been with him," I said, feeling a surge of anger rise within me again. "I saw it in your messages, both in your emails and your texts. You're cheating on me, and I can't take it anymore. Get out of this house today." "What? No, I'm not cheating on you," she pleaded, tears now streaming down her face. "If you don't want him around anymore, I'll make sure he stays away. But honey, please believe me, I've never cheated on you. Did he tell you that? He's lying." "Stop it," I said firmly, my heart breaking at the thought of her betraying me. "I went through your phone and saw everything. You need to pack your things and go stay with your parents. I made copies of all your emails and screenshots from your texts. I don't want to have to show them what you two say to each other. But if you keep lying to my face, I will. We're done. Go get your things." Despite all her attempts to play dumb and deny it, I finally had enough and showed her the copies of their texts. She only glanced at them for a moment before breaking down and crying uncontrollably. I felt a twinge of sympathy for her, seeing her so devastated. She apologized, claiming that things got out of hand and she wanted to end it with him, but he became possessive and threatened to expose her if she left him. I pointed out that none of that was mentioned in their texts, and she was still lying to me. She then said she would end things with him and make him go away. I responded by saying I didn't care what she did, but I had been talking to a lawyer, and divorce papers would be ready soon. This sent her into a rage, repeatedly asking "You've been talking to a lawyer," while getting closer and screaming at me. I had to tell her to calm down and remind her that there was a camera recording everything. She continued to break down, not resembling the person I once knew. She kept saying things like "You planned this all along," smiling to my face while plotting all of this. Each time she said it, I countered with examples of how she deceitfully plotted behind my back while pretending everything was fine between us. I asked her why she would do this to our marriage, and at first she couldn't give me a straight answer. She tried to justify it as meaningless sex, but when I called her out on ruining our relationship for no reason, she became quieter. I'm not sure if she was being honest or just trying to hurt me more, but apparently she deeply regretted what she did with him. She even referred to him as her soulmate, which almost caused me to lose control. When I asked why she didn't just leave me for him in the beginning, she explained that she needed to get away from him because she knew her family wouldn't approve of him. It turns out they didn't like him either. She also admitted that she could never be with him because it would cause a lot of problems with her ex and daughter, so going back to him was never a real option for her. As I stood there, my heart heavy with grief and anger, my wife's words fell on deaf ears. She pleaded and begged for another chance, promising to change and do anything to fix what she had done, but I remained resolute, telling her that there was no going back from this betrayal. Her eyes filled with tears as she realized the finality of my decision. Yet, she still held onto a glimmer of hope, insisting that we could work through it and not get a divorce. But I knew in my heart that forgiveness was not an option for me. With a heavy heart, I revealed to her that I had already taken steps to protect myself. I had opened a new bank account and transferred half of our joint savings into it, leaving the rest for her. Her shock only fueled my determination to cut all ties with her. As she began packing her belongings, quiet sobs escaping her lips, she made empty threats about checking to make sure nothing was missing. I simply shrugged off her words and calmly instructed her to take photos of how she left everything, so there would be no doubts about my innocence when she returned. In between packing, she spoke briefly with her parents, who were in disbelief over the situation. They apologized profusely to me before ushering their daughter out of my home. It was a painful and emotional moment, but I knew it was necessary for my own well-being. The sound of her footsteps disappearing down the hallway echoed in the silence, marking the end of our marriage and the beginning of a new chapter in my life. The next day, I awoke to a barrage of texts from soon-to-be ex. They were filled with apologies and declarations of love, but I couldn't bring myself to respond. The pain and anger roiled inside me as I thought about flushing my phone in frustration. However, I knew I needed to keep it on in case of an emergency or a change in plans with my son's mother. Feeling numb, I began responding to her texts by sending screenshots of the worst parts of our conversation without saying anything myself. My son's mother returned with my son later that evening, and she had brought dinner from my favorite Chinese place. Grateful for her presence, I didn't give my son the full details when he asked why we weren't together anymore. She immediately asked if she had cheated, and I confirmed her suspicion without going into too much detail. After they left, I found myself aimlessly wandering around the house, trying to hold myself together. Days have passed since then, and things are still changing rapidly. As I head off to the gym and then meet with my lawyers, it feels like this whole situation could go on forever. Soon-to-be ex's ex-husband is stopping by to pick up their daughter's belongings, and I will do my best to explain to her that I am always here for her if she needs me. Part of me wants to tell him the truth about soon-to-be ex cheating on both of us with Chris, but I know it would only create more drama and hurt. Despite all of this turmoil, I can't help but be grateful for my smart decision not to confront Chris. It would only waste my time and energy that could be better spent at work or at the gym, or finding a way to thank my son's mother for being an unwavering support through all of this chaos. And although this story may seem disjointed as it has taken me days to write and events keep unfolding, I am grateful for the moments of clarity and victory I have found amidst this tumultuous battle. Update number 4. Overall, I've been avoiding contact with my soon-to-be ex. Initially, I only communicated with her through my lawyer if it was absolutely necessary, but eventually, I spoke to her directly a few times. At first, my soon-to-be ex was all over the place with how she talked about Chris. One minute he was her soulmate and the one who got away, the next he was a predator who wouldn't leave her alone. Our family and friends have all heard the truth by now, and most of them are on my side since I provided detailed accounts in my lengthy Facebook post. She has since moved back in with her parents while I remain in our home. Thankfully, the house was acquired long before I even met her, so it's not an issue in terms of our divorce. Interestingly enough, Chris, the other man involved in the situation, decided to write me a long letter for some unknown reason. From what I gathered, she must have ended things with him in anger shortly after I found out about their affair, because his letter was full of statements like, "We were working on repairing our relationship when you stole her from me, and I've loved her for X amount of years." It made me see red and want to physically harm him, but I managed to calm down and think rationally before doing anything rash. The house has been eerily quiet since my wife and stepdaughter moved out. I can't bring myself to do anything with the empty room, so I keep the door closed. On one weekday, I get to see my stepdaughter because of her dad, who is a good father. We go on bike rides or grab something to eat together. I once asked her if she felt comfortable eating at my house, but she started crying. She loves her grandparents but doesn't enjoy living with them, so she spends more time with her dad. He's invited me over for a beer a few times, and we've had conversations about our common ex-partner, Chris. As I mentioned in my last post's comments, he knew about her affair the whole time they were together. I've been seeing my son and his mother more frequently now. Our schedules align on one weekday when I visit them for dinner, and I usually take him an extra day during the weekends. His mom often joins us for dinner on Friday nights. My son and I have talked about how he feels about my upcoming divorce, and although he hasn't said much, I can tell he's hurting. The first few times, he would just stare off into space and say, "I don't even want to think about her." He loves her and never expected her to betray him like this. It hit me hard when he said that. We always focus on how someone's affair affects us personally, but hearing it from him hurt more than anything she could have done to me. I've brought up therapy as an option for both him and his mom, but he insists he's okay and will come to us if he needs help. He's a mature kid, and I trust his judgment. He's usually pretty open about how he's feeling. He and I recently had a private conversation about my divorce from his mom and the reasons behind it. I was hesitant to talk about it because he's currently angry about the adultery and has a great relationship with his mom. But he asked about it, so I chose to be honest yet respectful. I told him that his mother hurt me just as much, but what she did was a terrible mistake, and although I'm not upset about it anymore, it took some time to get over it. My ex-wife has been a great support for me during this tough time. She's the reason I started having dinner with them once a week and kept my son longer, as she believed it would be better for me to not be alone in that big house. Some people have suggested that we get back together, but if that decision ever came, I would want to go through therapy first, maybe even couples therapy if she was open to it. We did talk briefly about our own divorce and the infidelity that caused it. I've moved on from it, and it doesn't bother me anymore, but she still talks about it as if she just got caught. It's not the first time I've forgiven her for it, but this time I added that upon further thought, she was likely taken advantage of by some creep due to being intoxicated. This wasn't someone she knew well. He only worked at her workplace occasionally or in a separate location. In any case, she hasn't seen him since a few days after the incident. It's difficult to think about that, because even though I've moved on, the fact remains that before she told me about the affair, I was happy and content with my life. The soon-to-be ex sort of helped me through it when we started dating, but once again, right when things were going well for me and I was happy, infidelity ruined it all. It makes me hesitant to pursue another relationship if this is what will eventually happen. However, despite all of this, I am looking forward to my trip to Disney World this July to clear my mind. Originally, it was meant to be a family trip with my ex-wife and son, but I managed to convince her to let my stepdaughter come along so she wouldn't feel left out. She'll probably use the time to start a new relationship like usual, but that's no longer my concern. Update number 5. Greetings everyone. It's been about 6 months since my first post here. Since then, I've been trying to focus on my health by working out regularly and continue working from home until further notice. However, that will soon come to an end. I've managed to keep in touch with my stepdaughter through her grandparents and biological father, whom she also cheated on with this man, who is not perfect but seems like a good dad and someone I can grab a beer with. I see my stepdaughter twice a week now, but never overnight. Her room remains untouched because it's too heartbreaking for me to even think about doing something else with it. She will always be my princess, and she gets excited when she comes to visit or when I take her out for dinner or bike rides. My son and I have been keeping a close eye on each other since he started therapy, after realizing that he could benefit from it. He had a close relationship with his stepmother, but ever since their falling out, he wanted nothing to do with her. He's been getting impulsive and angry, not just about her, and that's when I suggested therapy. He opened up to me about how betrayed he felt, and his longing for things to go back to the way they were before. It was tough to see him hurting like this. His mother has been by my side throughout this whole ordeal, and we've grown even closer because of it. She started inviting me over for dinner more frequently, worried about me being alone in our empty house. Now we eat dinner as a family multiple nights a week. Our families have taken notice of this and keep asking us if we plan on reconciling now that things seem to be going well between us. We've both said we're content with how things are right now, but it's hard not to think about it when everyone is talking about it. Besides physical intimacy, we act like how we used to when we were married, warm and comforting towards each other. But we know eventually we need to have a serious conversation about where our relationship is headed. For now, our focus is on our son's well-being. These changes have been tough on him, so any plans for reconciliation will have to wait until his life has stabilized. As for my ex-wife and our current situation, she has recently purchased a condo and is moving on with her life. Her parents are deeply disappointed in her actions, and even her daughter has been disrespecting her. I would love to say that she is suffering or regretful, but unfortunately, it seems like she's just moving on to the next person to manipulate. However, I did run into Chris at the grocery store last month. He looked terrified when he saw me, and I made the mistake of pointing him out to my brother. My brother proceeded to follow him around and mock him for being Prince Charming and texting other people's wives while also buying frozen pizzas for dinner. It was an uncomfortable encounter, but at least it gave me a good laugh. I'll be shopping at a different store from now on though. Update number 6. Despite everything, I managed to maintain a relationship with my stepdaughter and still make time for her. However, things took a turn for the worse when her biological father, who's not from our country and has citizenship elsewhere, essentially kidnapped her. He used the excuse that our mutual ex-wife was toxic and that he didn't want his daughter around her anymore. But after pressure from his own family, he eventually sent her back home 2 months later. Unfortunately, he cannot return to the US without facing arrest, so he removed himself from his daughter's life and left her in the care of someone we both consider harmful. Things only got worse for my ex after the divorce was finalized. It turns out she had started dating someone new before her ex-husband took their child and ran off. I found out about this when her former in-laws contacted me to say she had been hospitalized. Seems that she and Chris, her affair partner, had gotten back together, but then she broke it off again to pursue another man. Chris took her to a cheap motel and unleashed his anger on her, physically attacking her and causing serious injuries. She was lucky that a stranger intervened before he could do more harm. Now, Chris is in jail facing assault charges and possibly even attempted murder. I haven't kept up with the legal proceedings, as it's too painful to think about. My ex is currently going through physical therapy and recovery as she suffered a concussion and fractured vertebrae during the attack. Despite everything she did to me, I can't help but feel heartbroken seeing her in such a state. My stepdaughter has been spending a lot of time with me lately as I try to support and comfort her during this difficult time. Although she's understandably upset being with my son, his mother, and I gives her some stability and support. The only person left to mention is my ex-wife, the mother of my son. Many people have suggested that we reconcile, and in some ways, we have. We aren't forcing ourselves back into a relationship, but we have talked about our past issues, the infidelity that caused our separation, and my forgiveness towards her. While we are not officially back together, it's not uncommon for us to spend the night at each other's homes. It has been 5 days since we've slept in separate houses. However, to avoid confusing our son, we sleep in different rooms. For the past month, we have regularly been intimate with each other. It's going slowly and smoothly. Neither of us is pushing for more than what we have right now, and for the moment, it's working out well. I could continue writing paragraphs, but I'll end this update here and answer any questions if needed. That's where things stand currently. I hope Oop and his children are safe and doing better.